Kyiv has been striking back in the southern Kherson region, now occupied by Russia. Ukraine says that its forces destroyed a Russian ammunition depot and killed more than 50 soldiers. Russian state media gave a different account, claiming at least 7 people were killed. Ukraine is hailing it as a victory as it tries to drive back Russian forces.
The Ukrainian government says this is the moment its rockets hit a Russian military depot in Nova Kakhovka in Ukraine's south. Russian-backed officials say US-supplied weapons were involved in the strikes. Ukraine's president says his forces are aiming to reclaim territory.
The occupiers have already felt very well what modern artillery is, and they will not have a safe rear anywhere on our land which they occupied.
Russian forces now occupy large swathes of Ukraine's east. In the city of Severodonetsk, they patrol a landscape turned to rubble after their assault. Similar scenes across the river in Lysychansk, where buildings lie in ruins. Ukraine's forces retreated in the face of relentless attack. Now Russian troops hand out aid to residents they claim to have liberated. Ukraine's flag still flies in Bakhmut, one of the few remaining cities under Kyiv's control in the region of Donetsk. As the front line moves closer, residents are preparing for a future which resembles the past.
I remember the war of 1941. I was little back then. Now here, it's also horror.
Officials say a third of the population has already fled, and more are following them. But time is running short. Drivers say they face a perilous journey as bombings intensify across the region.
And for more, let's cross over to DW's Nick Connolly, who has the view from Kyiv. Nick, as we've been hearing, Ukrainian forces hitting back harder against the Russian-backed troops in the south. Is this the counteroffensive that Kyiv's been telling civilians that it's preparing for?
I think it's definitely the preparation to the counteroffensive. We've seen Ukraine using new American-delivered weapons, rocket artillery systems. HIMARS is the name, to attack Russian logistics hubs, Russian weapons depots, to basically deprive Russia of that huge advantage it's been having and taking advantage of in recent weeks and months, of just having 7 to 10 times more artillery systems at their disposal. At least those are the figures that the Ukrainians have been talking of. So basically they're trying to starve the Russian positions in Kherson region, which are already a lot less well equipped than the Russian positions in the east of the country, ahead of then trying to make some ground and push forward and really start making progress and taking more territory for the first time in a couple of months.
And as that fighting continues, Nick, the United Nations has released new numbers on the human toll of the war, and I'd just like to walk us through some of them. They say that more than 5 million people have been displaced, at least 5,000 civilians killed, saying that that number is actually likely much higher. Walk us through how people in Ukraine are coping nearly half a year now into this war.
It is amazing how this country has continued functioning, how the trains have kept running, how mobile phone connections have been restored after infrastructure has been destroyed time and time again. No issue with electricity for now. Basic services available here in Kyiv certainly, but also places pretty close to the front lines. Obviously in Donbass, closest to where those artillery battles have been going on, some people have been left without power, without internet for weeks now. But overall, the country is managing to stand up a lot better than anyone had imagined, but it is now, obviously, after so many months of fighting, taking its toll. And the question is, how long can individual families, individual Ukrainians carry on, often without jobs, often living off their savings? How long can the government here carry on paying pensions and wages? There's definitely a big question mark over Western promises of aid. We've had lots of discussion about Western weapons deliveries coming too late and in smaller numbers than promised, but the same is now the case with financial donations. The finance minister here in Kyiv worried that lots of the promises made in the early weeks of the war, when there was all that attention for Ukraine, have not materialized yet, and there is a real worry that as this drags on and attention gets taken to other conflicts, to other issues, the cost of living crisis in Europe, that Ukraine might end up having to really struggle to keep the country afloat and to keep the government machine working.
And there's also a lot of worry around the world, not least because of the more than 20 million tons of grain stuck in the country because of the fighting. Nick, we understand that delegations from Ukraine and Russia are set to meet in Turkey today to discuss a deal to resume exports. What more can you tell us on that front?
I think there's not a huge deal of optimism here in Kyiv that they'll get to some kind of agreement. The basic problem is that Kyiv does not trust any promises from Russia. So basically, any kind of potential deal to take mines, sea mines away, to remove them, to allow those main Ukrainian ports of Odessa and Mykolaiv to reopen, that is all pretty tentative and not looking very likely for now. Also the question about whether commercial shipping companies would actually send their private vessels into disputed waters, as is the case around Odessa. But there is a small piece of hopeful news from the south of Ukraine, the far south, in the Danube Delta, where we've heard that a new channel has been opened that allows smaller ships to enter Ukrainian ports, not the big ports which used to export most of the grain, but that's basically the first time now since the beginning of the war that grain has been exported by sea from Ukraine rather than being shipped across the borders by land. So a small bit of hope, but still a huge problem, and a new harvest coming in, and no one really with an answer to where to put all this grain on top of last year's harvest that's still there in the silos waiting to be exported, waiting to reach people across the world who are really struggling with exploding prices for their bread.
Nick Connolly in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, for us. Thank you so much. And here are some other developments related to the war in Ukraine. A Russian opposition figure is facing up to 15 years in prison after being charged under a new law in Russia that makes it a crime to spread false information about the military. Ilya Yashin has been a critic of Russia's war in Ukraine. The Russian-backed Donetsk People's Republic has opened an embassy in central Moscow. According to the separatists, a solemn opening ceremony was canceled due to intensified shelling in the breakaway region in eastern Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has been expected to take part in the event. Some Ukrainians are joining the war effort in original ways. Around the capital, Kyiv, a group of hairdressers and beauticians are offering their skills to people who survived the Russian occupation. Their aim? To bring back a little pride and dignity to those who have lost homes or loved ones, or even survived torture or rape. DW's Nick Spicer met up with the so-called beauty volunteers during their recent stop in Bucha, the town now synonymous with the horrors of war.
They have survived the very worst. Now, these Bucha residents want to look their very best, with free haircuts, manicures, facials, and massages, because the beauty volunteers have come to town. The group's founder, Olha Belitska, says they help those who've suffered because of the Russian invasion.
They are still without home. Their houses are damaged. But they want to still pretty, beautiful, but they don't have money for this. They don't have money for themselves because they need to maybe rebuild their life again.
Stylist Denis Stekanenko had to flee the war in the East himself. He says he's just doing what he knows best.
Right now I can do this, and I do what I do, and make some people happy.
Barbara Galeb-Atamanenko says the volunteers are a kind of battalion fighting on what he calls the beauty front, but their work is often anything but skin deep.
To speak with them, to understand their mood and feelings, to try to understand feelings. And it's like art therapy, I think.
And some of the people here say the treatments give them more than inner peace. They can spark hope.
It helps me see Bucha in a better future. It was a wonderful city, a beautiful European country. We cannot be slaves. We want to be free, to live in dignity, to earn money, to raise children, to rebuild our town. We will have better times.
The Beauty Volunteers group have been making trips for around 2 months now. They only go to places that were invaded and occupied by Russian troops, and they include some of the very best hairstylists and beauticians in the Ukrainian capital.
But founder Olha says the volunteers have to be strong. They hear many, many painful stories.
But we have no maybe choice to be to cry or to show our feelings. No, we are here to help. That's why we must be strong. We must be happy, smile.
The beauty volunteers are hoping to expand, raise more money, visit more towns and cities. And as the war grinds on, there's every chance they'll be able to continue work, which they call a way of serving their country.